Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Growing more with less is the mantra of Nebraska's corn farmers, and they're using incredible technology to do it. Soil moisture monitors let them know when their crop needs water and how much. GPS systems eliminate overlaps in the field, saving fuel and money. New hybrids reduce the use of pesticides and increase yields. When you're talking new technology and innovation, Nebraska corn farmers are all ears. Nebraska's family corn farmers, sustaining innovation.
Market Journal, Television for Agricultural Business Decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Jeff Peterson analyzes the USDA's June crop report. Stephen Baenziger discusses problems in Nebraska's winter wheat crop. We learn more about U.S. corn exports to Japan, and Kathy Anderson talks about producer sign-up for commodity programs. Jeff Peterson from Heartland Farm Partners is our market analyst this week. The first rating of this year's soybean crop shows 69% is in good to excellent condition. 74% of corn is listed in the best two categories. On Wednesday, the USDA released its latest estimates on U.S. production in 2015, as well as beginning and ending stocks. Corn and soybean outputs for this harvest were left unchanged. For 2015-2016, corn beginning and ending stocks were raised. Soybean beginning and ending stocks were lowered. We talked about the numbers and the market's reaction to them with Jeff Friday morning. Give me your overall thoughts on Wednesday's numbers, Jeff.
You know, as the crop report came out overall, you know, it was about as we expected. It probably a little bit tighter on the soybean carryout. So if we kind of walk through for the 2014 crop on corn, it came in at 1.86 or 1.876 billion bushels of corn. That actually was up about 25 million bushels from the previous month, and that all came because they did reduce it from the ethanol demand side. They reduced ethanol demand. That carried right into the 2015 carryout. And that came in at 1.771 billion, and that also was a 25 million bushel increase. So those numbers carried right through, Jeff. So I don't think there was any surprises there. The ethanol is a little bit of a surprise, but overall it's still within what the expectations were.
How did markets react?
You know what, the markets, they went ahead and put some pressure on. Yeah. We overall had an uptrend coming into this report. Even though we still got a downtrend going on in the market, we had an uptrend coming into the report. And once they didn't see any bullish surprises, they went ahead and started selling. The interesting one was soybeans, though, Jeff. Over on the soybean carryout, 330 million bushels of carryout. They continue to tighten that up. That's a 20 million bushel decrease from what we saw last month. 10 million bushel increase in crush, 10 million increase in the export side, and that flowed right into the 2015 numbers. Came in at 475 million bushels versus 500 million last month. Those numbers that we saw in the 2014, the increase in crush and the increase in exports flowed right through. But then in the 15 year, they increased crush another 5 million bushels. And that was probably a little bit tighter than what people thought.
Tell me about the current crop condition across Nebraska first.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you look at Nebraska, corn is basically planted. As we look at emergence, our emergence really is probably a little bit behind what we'd like to see. Probably the problems over on soybeans. You know, we're 83% planted on beans. Doesn't sound too bad until you compare it to the 5-year average, and we should be 95% planted. We are higher than the national average, currently at 79%. But I think the big concern is as you move into southeast Nebraska, there's definitely some areas down there that there's probably going to be some prevent plant. So not all the acres in Nebraska, Kansas, or Missouri will probably get planted this year. The condition overall is not bad right now, and this is what's kind of strange as we look at soybeans. The condition on soybeans, as we're setting it right now, we're just slightly behind the national average right now, so that's really not too bad.
Let's talk about ethanol. Describe production and use numbers that we're starting to see.
Yeah, the numbers that came out on Wednesday, 992,000 barrels today average. That was a record taking us back to 2014 in December. That's 4.8% ahead of last year. USDA's current numbers for demand is only 1.3%. We only need 843,000 barrels a day average, so the demand is actually ahead of pace. So I'm kind of surprised that USDA lowered the demand when in the last report.
I want to talk about avian influenza. Do you think it's important enough or significant enough to have an impact locally or nationally on corn and soybean meal?
Yeah, on corn and soybeans, and in particular soybean meal as we look at it, I don't think it's important enough nationally to affect the futures prices. However, I do think it's important enough locally to see some impact that will impact basis for both the corn demand and also the soybean meal demand. And we've seen a little bit of that in different areas.
But too soon to quantify just how much it is?
I think it is too soon, yeah. We'll start seeing more on that, but yeah, a little too soon yet.
You guys, where are you at right now with your corn recommendations, and how far sold are you on this 2015 crop?
Yeah, and it depends on our program, but I would say 80% is where you'd like to be on the 2015 sales for new crop, and on the bean side, I'd like to be sold out. On this run that we're having up, or we had up in here, and if we get a little bit more bounce, I'd use that as an opportunity to make sure you're getting caught up on sales.
Finally, at the end of the month, we'll see some numbers from the USDA on grain stocks and acreage. Anything that you're looking for, any big surprises that we might see?
A couple things I think. On the stock side, I don't anticipate seeing any surprises. Over on the acreage side, we think if anything is that individuals may be surprised that maybe the acreage numbers could be a little bit bigger than what's thought on both corn and beans. We don't think the prevent plant concerns will really be built into those numbers yet.
Next week, Ed Ussett from the University of Minnesota will join us with his thoughts on corn and soybean markets. 89% of Nebraska's corn is emerged, according to the USDA's latest crop progress report. Earlier this week, we talked with Nebraska Extension plant pathologist Tamra Jackson-Ziems, who says this is the time frame for the state's corn growers to be sampling fields for nematodes.
Well, most of our fields are still early enough where the corn is still small enough that they can collect samples for nematode analysis, and we especially recommend that people try to sample those fields before they reach the 6-leaf stage, or V6. This is especially important in sandy fields where some of those nematodes can travel deep in the soil. We recommend sampling close to the plants through that root zone. They need at least 2 cups of soil. Put it in plastic bags, keep it cool if possibly, refrigerate it, ship it as quickly as possible, and be gentle with it so that you don't kill the nematodes.
A step-by-step process of sampling cornfields for nematodes can be found on the Market Journal website, along with submission information to UNL's Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. Nebraska's winter wheat condition is among the worst in the nation. The latest progress report shows a third of the state's wheat is rated poor to very poor. Only South Dakota has a larger percentage in the worst 2 categories. On Monday, we talked with UNL's Baenziger about some of the diseases Nebraska's growers have faced this year, including stripe rust, which he says has been disastrous.
Well, this has been an outstandingly bad year for stripe rust. It's a disease that requires freestanding moisture to infect, and I think we have not had 3 days in a row without rain since the 1st of April, and now we're into June, so you've had all of April, all of June, all of May with rain, and when it's not raining, it's been humid, so you have dews, which is freestanding moisture. The other problem is that the stripe rust likes to start in cool weather, so April and May are ideal. We have never seen stripe rust quite like this, and it's been absolutely disastrous.
Tell me about the fusarium head blight that we're now seeing in some fields across the state.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see this, but this is a head that has fusarium head blight on it, and it'd be green partially, and then it would have sort of like it's been blanched or bleached. And what happens with fusarium head blight is that sometimes it infects just a floret and doesn't spread. Sometimes it infects the top of the head and then spreads up and down. Sometimes it'll infest almost the whole head. Now this field has actually been sprayed with a fungicide that controls fusarium head blight. The difficulty we had is it was so wet we couldn't get our sprayers out in time to control it perfectly, and even under the best of conditions, sometimes your sprays cannot hold up against the conditions weather gives you.
Was the fusarium head blight, was it very common across the state?
You know, so far it's just showing up. So I think growers will see it now. I mean, this field when we were out here just last week did not look nearly as infested as this, But what happens is the blanching begins to show after the disease has occurred. So this head may have looked totally green, and now it's 5 days later, and now you can see the blanching.
Do treatment options exist now?
If you're really worried about it, you probably could. I would talk to Dr. Stephen Wegulu, who our plant pathologist. He would have the economic thresholds and see. Certainly if your wheat is not flowered and in western Nebraska, but I think hopefully they're beginning to dry out, you could still probably treat because it's a much earlier crop than here.
Any other disease or virus problems that growers need to be aware of, or that you're seeing at least?
We've seen a little bit of barley yellow dwarf, and some people wonder about that. They may say their fungicide failed, but it's a virus, and so the fungicide doesn't take care of a virus. Normally it'll give you a yellow leaf. All the chlorophyll blanches out of it. Sometimes it gives you a red leaf. On oats it's called red leaf and oats. Barley, of course, it's barley yellow dwarf, so it's yellow leaves. Wheat can go red or yellow depending upon anthracene. The other disease, which I'm surprised we haven't seen, is bacterial streak, which is a bacteria, and again, a fungicide doesn't control it. We've got some lines that we've released that are very tolerant of that, but most of our lines aren't, and so with as much moisture as we've had, I'm a little surprised I haven't seen more bacterial streak, but you'll see that quite commonly also.
On the Market Journal website, we'll link to more resources on wheat disease identification and treatment. As we first told you last month, Japan has been the biggest buyer of U.S. corn every year since 1990. As the world's largest grower, American producers are estimated to have planted 89.2 million acres of corn this spring. The total land area of Japan is about 90 million acres. During our visit to Tokyo in late April, we learned more about how customers in Japan use U.S. corn when we talked with Tetsuo Hamamoto from the U.S. Grains Council.
Japan is a really, really big market for the U.S. Agricultural products, including corn. In the case of corn, Japan imports 15 million metric tons per year, and it's the same size as when you scoop the 100 kernel of corn, 2 to 3 or more, 5 kernel of corn are coming to Japan.
What is it used for?
It's used for mainly animal feed. 2/3 of the imported U.S. corn is used for animal, and 1/3 is used for food production, including starch and corn grits production.
What part of the diet does corn operate, or does corn hold in the diet for livestock here?
It's all animal species, from poultry, swine, beef, and dairy. And in the case of poultry, it's about 40 to 50% of the ration is corn.
Is it a shifting diet? Do livestock producers try to change out corn for anything else at any point? 50
years ago, or 52 years ago, accurately, the U.S. Grains Council established office in Japan. At that time, average swine producer were keeping 2 to 5 pigs in their backyard. The U.S. Grains Council promoted corn-based, modern, efficient livestock production to the Japanese livestock industry, and 50 years later, they really changed their production practice and make it more efficient. And the Japanese diet at that time were not really rich in terms of the meat and dairy consumption, but now it's one of the major diets in Japan.
What about dried distillers grains in Japan? Do they operate a big part?
DDGS at the moment is not really a huge market, but Japan imports about 600,000 metric tons per year of DDGS. And I hope it's growing more. And the DDGS is mainly used for egg productions because the Japanese like the yellow egg. So the higher concentration of xanthophyll, that's a yellow pigment, helps the egg yolk becomes more yellowish.
How is Japan trying to use ethanol in its country?
Japan has the government target of E3 at the moment, but it's not really it's not a mandate. So the U.S. Grains Council is now started to promote ethanol imports to Japan, and under the E3, and hopefully the Japan will make it E10 and will be a big market for U.S. ethanol.
What's the attitude in Japan related to biotechnology?
I would say the Japanese people are generally accepting the biotech more or less, and there are people that are vocal against the biotech. It's the same in everywhere, but the Japanese people, when explained well about the scientific safety, food safety, and the benefits of biotech, they are really ready to understand it.
What do you think the U.S. farmer should know about Japan and its consumers?
Japan is really a loyal customer of the U.S. corn, and they are really wanting to know who are producing corn, like the farmers, and wanted to talk to them directly. One of what we are doing is to invite U.S. corn farmers and to then talk to the Japanese customers. They really, really like that kind of opportunities. Not only the quality, not only the price, but those kind of relationships really, really work the Japanese customers and keeping them loyal to the U.S. grain.
As you mentioned, it's already the #1 import market for U.S. corn. Can it become even bigger?
Yes, there is a room because of the aging population and population decline of Japan. It's not easy, but there is a market, huge market, on the back of Japan, China, and other Asian countries. They are really confident in the Japanese food in general in terms of the safety and quality. So we believe that there is a room for export of the Japanese agriculture products to those regions. And in the case of the livestock products, that means more use of corn and more import of U.S. corn.
We'll continue to show you our interviews from Japan in future episodes of Market Journal. For our past reporting on the importance of Japan to U.S. agriculture, you can visit the MJ's Extras tab on our website. The June Nebraska farmer says when producers consider a new practice, they often ask what the gain in yield will be. But this month's issue says the key reason for using cover crops is improving soil health. As a wheat grower and dairy farmer who harvests corn for silage, Ben Steffen has a longer window to establish certain cover crops to break compaction, improve water infiltration, cover the ground, and build organic matter. To learn more about the long-term benefits Steffen has seen on his farm in southeast Nebraska, you can read the June issue of Nebraska Farmer. You saw in last week's episode of Market Journal that producers with prevented plantings in corn or soybeans have 15 days from the final planting date to report delays to the FSA. As Kathy Anderson from Nebraska's State Farm Service Agency said, the state agency has requested an extension of those deadlines. Additionally, the acreage reporting deadline for farmers is July 15th, and as you'll now hear, farmers will also soon need to sign contracts for ARC and PLC farm programs for the 2014-2015 crop years.
We are anticipating that the Secretary will make an announcement soon, hoping sometime possibly towards mid-June that we will begin contract enrollment. Since the implementation of the Farm Bill in February of 2014, we've mainly been focused on producer education, held a number of meetings across the state in conjunction with UNL Extension. Producers have really been focused on all the options they've had available to them under the Farm Bill, reallocating bases, updating their payment yields, and then deciding which programs they wanted to elect into for the life of the Farm Bill. So there is an important final step, and it's an annual step, and that is coming in and doing contract enrollment for each farm that's going to participate.
How complicated is that?
Yeah, it really just involves the producers on the farm coming in, telling us who had the risk in production in the crops each year, and signing that contract to participate.
When it comes to these new commodity programs, do you have an idea of what the potential payouts might be?
Well, Under previous programs, really since about 1996, we've made direct payments. And with the 2014 Farm Bill, the authority for the direct payments was repealed. In fact, the last time we issued direct payments was in the fall of 2013. Under the new programs, which are the Price Loss Coverage Program and the Ag Risk Coverage Program, those programs are dependent upon looking at whether or not there is an actual loss in price, and in the case of the Ag Risk Coverage Program, whether there is a loss in revenue. Since the payment is determined by whether or not there's a loss in price, we have to actually go through an entire marketing year for the crop before that determination can be made. So, for example, for corn and soybeans from 2014, that marketing year began in September of 2014 and will run clear through the fall of 2015. So we won't actually know whether payments are earned until those final crop prices have been determined. Based on some current projections, it does appear that there could be some substantial payments under Ark County if producers chose to participate in the county level program. We don't have final numbers for Nebraska yet, but indications are that many of our producers did opt to elect into that Ark County program. From the Price Loss Coverage Program standpoint, currently based on price projections, there appears that there could be a small payment on corn, but that fluctuates as the projections move forward.
There was a June 1st deadline when it comes to dealing with conservation, but for those that are actually, when we talk about conservation compliance, what do you want farmers to know about actually following those guidelines and provisions?
Right. Well, conservation compliance has been an important part of our Farm Bill provisions for many years, since the mid-1980s. For producers that have historically participated in our FSA programs, they are not new to conservation compliance, but a key factor in our 2014 Farm Bill was that it linked conservation compliance now to eligibility for the crop insurance premium subsidy. What that really means for a producer is approximately 60% of a producer's total premium subsidy is subsidized. So it's very important for a producer to have a Form 801026 on file by June 1st, and that's for the following reinsurance year for crop insurance. But the second part of that is they have to ensure that they're in compliance with those provisions. So they need to identify whether they've got highly erodible land on their farm or whether there's any wetlands that exist on the farm. And NRCS could assist them with that. And once they know whether they've got those highly erodible lands, they need to be sure that they're using an approved conservation system when they're farming out there so that they stay in compliance and they remain eligible not only for FSA program benefits, but now for the crop insurance premium subsidy as well.
Now with this week's weather forecast, here's Nebraska Extension State Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we are again for the weekly forecast. During this last week, we had two precipitation events. The first one occurred Saturday night into Sunday morning that impacted northeast Nebraska and the southern panhandle. The heaviest totals reported to just to the north of the Norfolk area up toward the South Dakota border, where 2 to 3 inches were reported, and outside of that, 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches was very common. More importantly, the big widespread precipitation event occurred on Wednesday through Thursday morning, dropping 2 to 4 inches across a broad area of central through eastern Nebraska and essentially south of the Columbus area all the way toward Fall City. Heavy precipitation leading to localized flooding once again. This has been a persistent pattern now for the better part of 5 weeks. Unfortunately, we did have some drying early in the week, only to be followed up with this heavy precipitation event, and it looks like a similar pattern may be developing once again as we move through this next 7-day period. Heavy precipitation at the beginning of the forecast period, at the end of the forecast period, and scattered activity in between. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we have in store. Here's the energy that is expected to move through eastern Nebraska this afternoon. This little red cell here is a little vortex generating thunderstorm activity across the eastern half of the state. Localized heavy precipitation may be possible if thunderstorms get going good from east central Nebraska into northeast Nebraska. And then as we get into tomorrow, we will see that that trough will push southward, but there will be a little bit of residual moisture left over, which will set up a convergence zone across eastern Kansas. Some of this moisture may make its way into southeastern Nebraska, but the heaviest of the precipitation should stay to our south. We may see some scattered afternoon thunderstorms develop across the high elevations of the panhandle, but most of that will remain to the west and will not propagate eastward. As we get into Monday, it looks to be the most benign of the days as the front tries to push that system toward our south, and we have an approaching front coming in from the northern plains, and that leaves us kind of in between system. So if we do see any precipitation, it will be during the prime eating hours of the afternoon in the panhandle, and some scatter-like precipitation very possible across extreme northern Nebraska. As we get into Tuesday, the system drags a little bit farther southward, increasing the likelihood of scattered shower and thunderstorm activity across southern South Dakota and northern Nebraska, and then this system will start to pull toward the northeast, bringing the moisture up to interact with this frontal boundary, which would increase the odds of precipitation materializing. As we get into Wednesday, the system pushes a little bit farther southward. This system starts to move toward the Great Lakes region, and so we'll see a convergence of the moisture across the central plains. So we'll see scattered thunderstorm activity developing from northeast and north central Nebraska, and maybe pushing a little bit forward toward the Kansas border during the afternoon and evening hours. And this will continue on into Thursday as the system kind of lifts toward the Great Lakes. Will generate widespread heavy precipitation across the eastern Dakotas and eastern Nebraska, and then by Friday everything departs toward our northeast, and we are left high and dry at least for one day. As we look toward the temperature forecast, consistently looking at normal to above normal temperatures across the southern part of the state, and the northern part of the state a little bit cooler conditions as you're closer to the frontal boundary. As we look to the 8 to 14 day forecast from next Thursday to the following Tuesday, the warmer temperatures continue to the east of us, and in terms of precipitation we are still stuck in this persistent wet pattern.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews are available on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. They include information on corn and soybean markets, wheat problems in Nebraska fields, corn exports to Japan, and producer sign-up for commodity programs. As always, you can keep up with Market Journal during the week on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Next week, we'll report from the International Food and Agribusiness Management Association Conference in Minneapolis, where Ed Ussett will be our market analyst. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board and the Nebraska Soybean Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board and the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Whether it's spring planting, fall harvesting, or just a drive across the state, soy biodiesel helps a diesel-powered engine operate in a demanding job. Soybean oil from Nebraska soybeans makes biodiesel a renewable fuel that's also environmentally responsible. The soybean checkoff plays a major role in supporting the use and availability of biodiesel. The Nebraska Soybean Board, growing opportunity from the ground up.